All right, we're gonna go ahead and begin. So first, let me personally thank you for taking the time out of your busy morning or night. I know we've got a few people on here, and it's almost midnight for them. So I definitely appreciate you taking the time, and I want to welcome you. So my name is Raymond Buscom. I'm an industry business consultant here with Dassault Systems. I've had about 25 plus years of CAD experience, multiple different platforms, 2D, 3D kind of mix. And one of the things that has been a common thread for my journey is really looking towards how do I automate my work tasks, and whether that being using the tools out of the box, or in this case, how can I use some of the customization techniques to really get the most out of the software? And so this is a perfect webinar. I love this topic. You're going to see that I have a lot of passion, and I might talk a little bit fast because of that, but I'm going to try to wane it in. I'd also like to introduce Vince. Vince, if you'll give us a little bit of your background.
Sure, thanks, Raymond. Also, a few decades of doing customization in many different CAD platforms. Been doing this for a while, but again, I really enjoy the subject. Love talking about automation and customization, and I think the stuff that you've got to present here today looks pretty interesting. So hopefully, the folks get a chance to see some of that.
Thank you, Vince. Vince is one of the foremost Lisp experts I've ever met, so I'm joyed to have him with us.
Thanks.
So the agenda that we're going to have, we're going to go through a couple different topics. We're not going to spend a lot of time on any one topic. And the reason why is because when I was asked to put together this webinar, I've worked with thousands of customers, and one of the biggest roadblocks that they have is understanding that they might be at the A stage of where they want to be, and they want to get to Z, but they don't really know kind of how to get there or if it's possible. And so if you can visualize that it can be possible, that's about 50% of the problem. And then you just work backwards from there. So, we're going to keep it kind of high level. We're going to give you some great examples, a couple tips and pointers. We're going to have examples. If you want some of these example files, we're more than happy to share them. Go ahead and put a comment in the questions. At the tail end of our presentation, we will open up to Q&A. So if you do have any questions that come up, don't hesitate to throw them in. We'll get to as much as we can. If I miss any questions, or if there are questions that are slightly off topic, I may take them and respond to you privately. But I will, kind of guarantee you that anybody that touches base with us, I will get back with you. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. First topic is basically, automation without programming. We're going to talk about script files for a little bit. A script file is essentially a text file that you rename the extension. And that text file essentially is, when given a DraftSight, it's like if you're typing in the command line. So if you know how to type in a line and then pick, and then go like 0, 0, and then, 5, 5, that's, you could literally put line space, 0, 0, space 5, 5, that would create that line for you. So very, very similar. And I'm going to show you a kind of a quick example, and then I'm going to show you a little bit more complicated example to kind of broaden out what, kind of what can be done with it. So I'm going to jump over and I'm going to start a quick little video here, and I'll kind of explain what's going on. So on the left is Notepad, and then on the right, I've got two files. One happens to be just a point cloud. It's an XYZ data, This might be where you need to put blocks. This might be where you need to put points or lines. In this particular case, I'm just going to type in point space M space and then save it as an SCR extension. So it's going to insert multiple points, and it's literally going to go through this entire file, and it's going to insert all of these. And I want to say I think there's like 40,000 plus points that we're going to be inserting here. So what we're going to do is we save that as an SCR, and then we're going to take and simply drag and drop it. Pick the SCR file out of Windows Explorer, drop it in the DraftSight, and you're going to see the command prompt just go crazy. Obviously, much faster than typing these in one by one. You would never insert by hand 40,000 points, obviously, but this gives you a very quick example of how to take a list of something and do something with it. So once this has been imported, I'll go ahead and zoom out. It's a grid, it's an elevation grid, And in fact, when I rotate it around in three-dimensional space, you can see it's actually a profile. And this happens to be Long's Peak in Colorado, one of my absolute favorite day hikes. That was kind of a cool example that I thought with a ton of points. The other example that we're going to talk about gets a little bit more complex. So this is the PNZD file. It's similar to kind of what you get from surveys. So you kind of get a point identifier, you get a northern or an eastern, and then you get the elevation, and then you get kind of a label. And so what do you do with that? So we're going to take and we're going to open this up and import it into Excel. And the reason why I'm doing the import is because I can do space delimitative, and so that I can get these in multiple columns. And then you're going to see that I'm going to use kind of Excel as almost a staging ground where we're going to go through and we're going to kind of lay out what we want it to do. First thing is I'm going to use a dash command. A dash command in DraftSight is obviously one without a dialog box. And I wanted to show you what Excel does if you put a dash. It thinks it's a formula. So you need to change that cell to a text format. Then you can type it in. So the first thing we're going to want this thing to do is create a layer. And M is for make, if you've ever typed it in. And we're going to make, in this particular case, river for the first point. And then we're going to type in CR point. CR point's not a command, but I'm going to come back to that in just a second. And then what we're going to want to do is the XYZ location. And so we're just going to use common delimitative. We're going to copy that in. So we get that. And then using Excel, I'm just going to copy this formula all the way down. And I want to get rid of the formulas. So the easiest way to do that is to select the column, copy it, and then do paste as text. And voila, we don't have any more formulas. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to set this to text as well, and we're going to insert a piece of text. So we're actually going to put a label right on that same point. So we can just copy column D over, that will put our point there, and then really what we're going to be doing is setting the height of the text object, 0.2, and then the rotation of 0, and then what text we want to insert is going to actually be the point number. So again, we're going to copy these down and kind of fill out all the points. So this is going to get, it's a little bit more complicated than just inserting a single point. We're going to make sure everything's on a certain layer. We're going to add a label and we're going to add a point to this. I'm going to go ahead and copy this now out of Excel. I'm going to switch back over to Notepad++. You'll see that both Vince and I use Notepad++. It's actually a really cool tool. And so in this particular example, and it's free, let me mention that, I'm going to just paste. And so when I paste it from Excel, Excel does a couple of things. So between its columns, it's going to put in a tab. And I can see that by turning on all the symbols. So what I'm going to do is select one of those tabs, and I'm going to go ahead and replace that with just a space because I need the command to actually type in a space between these columns. So we'll just do a mass replace all. So that's going to go through, replace everything. Now, if you remember, I put that CR point in there. Point is a command, but I'm just use CR for carriage return. And this is really cool. You can use find and replace for adding an additional carriage return. So now we have a multi-line all coming from a single row inside of Excel. We're going to save that over and we're going to, again, just kind of create this SCR file. And then we're going to, over back in DraftSight, we need to create a new drawing. And then we're going to do the same thing, a little bit of drag and drop magic. And this one's going to run a little bit slower because it's really trying to create layers on every single row. And if you try to create a new layer and the layer already exists, it just, DraftSight ignores the command. That's why we just kind of brute force everything. And then we don't have to worry about that. But it's going through, it's inserting creating a layer, making sure it's created, inserting the point, adding a piece of text at the same for that label. So we'll give it just a couple seconds to kind of finish. And again, lots of happening there. Zoom out, you can kind of see it's another grid with, it looks like some survey points in the middle for maybe a river and some roads. We can jump into layers. There's the labels that we have. We can change the color so we can kind of see what's going on that. And then if we just rotate it into a little bit more of a perspective view, you can kind of see, sure enough, there's a river going through it, and then there's some roads that have been surveyed out. So again, a great example of what can be done without actually writing any type of actual code. I could see this used very, if you have a lot of blocks that you have to insert, you can control that. Just if you're getting mass amounts of data from someplace, this is a very valuable trick on that. All right.
Thanks, Raymond. So if you, the other example we wanted to show is, let's say you're going to do that over and over again, but you just wanted to write a program to handle that process rather than using the script. What I've done here is I've got an example, which is basically a simple Lisp routine. It's about 40 lines of code, maybe even less, that will allow you to select a CSV file. So if you're using a comma delimited file in Excel, you could bring that in. And so we could bring in and insert points, we could insert objects, or we could even insert blocks. But Raymond, if you want to switch over to the other screen, we could show how that works. All right, so in this example, I created a function and it's just called insert points. And when I do that, it will ask me specifically for my CSV file. You can see I've got my X, Y, and Z values there. And just by selecting the file, it'll just automatically bring in. Now I put a little check here and it said to say, if it's okay, say yes. If not, it would just undo the process. But again, it was a very simple, and here's the example of the Lisp routine. It's a simple Lisp routine. It's not that long. It may look a little bit complicated, but as you start to learn, if you get to learn Lisp or if you've done Lisp routines before, it's really pretty simple to do this. And the highlighted line, and this is in Notepad++ as well, it's just a different color, but that line that's highlighted there shows the command, which in this case, I'm just using point, but it could be inserting a block or inserting a circle, a label, whatever. You know, these things are very easy to do. And so just another example or a different methodology to do something very similar in terms of just bringing in some points. So the second example is just to bring in the points, but in this case, I'm going to bring in an X and a Y. I'm going to bring in a line and a little bit more code, but the difference here is I'm going to do a little trickery, which is I'm going to place a dimension as the label. Now, if you notice, we jump over to the video. If you notice, when I go to bring this in this case, I created the command called insert lines. I'll select my CSV file, which has X, Y, and also a label. But in this case, I'm going to bring in a dimension as my label. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to suppress the extension line and the dimension lines so that I actually create a dynamic associative label. So if I go into a stretch command, select the endpoints of these lines and start dragging, you'll notice that they automatically update. So another interesting thing is if I'm using a dimension as a label without showing the dimension lines, I can come into my dimension style. In this case, I created one called text only, and I can change my precision. I can also turn alternate units on, but changing any of these parameters inside of the dimension definition will automatically update these things dynamically. So again, if I go back to my stretch, select those endpoints and I start dragging things around, you'll notice that these things just dynamically update. So very cool, but just a little different way of doing something where we create a label that's in the drawing. And here, if you look at this program, it's a little longer because in the beginning part of this Lisp routine, I'm actually going to create that dimension style that suppresses those dimension and extension lines. So just another kind of cool example of what you can do with less than 50 lines of code in a just simple Lisp routine to create lines, or in this case, bring in lines and label them dynamically.
Very cool, Vance. Thank you. Our next example is going to be with Microsoft Excel. And if you know me, if you're a close friend or a family member, you know I kind of get teased in my social circle about being kind of Mr. Excel. I use Excel for everything. If Excel could pop popcorn, I would probably have it do it. So I love Excel, and I think it's a very valuable tool. And then combining with the power of Visual Basic is just awesome. So I have two examples to show you. One is with block attributes. So if you use blocks, you use attributes. If you use attributes, you think about that as the database of your drawing, right? There's a lot of information there. In a lot of cases, you either have to extract that information or you have to mass update or mass change. So I'll show you kind of a really cool Excel VB. It didn't take very long. In fact, there was more code to get Excel to be fancy than it was to have Excel talk to DraftSight. And then the other one will be a customer example where they are doing some really cool things with some constraints. So here what we see is a facility management drawing. So it's got tons of blocks. Inside of Excel, I can just use a DraftSight flyout. This is what I made, and import block definitions. And what that's going to do is it's going to show me every single block definition, every quantity of it. That's the column B in it. It's going to show me what's the labels that it's using, et cetera, et cetera. I've got a couple room tags that I want to actually do something with. So I'm going to go and import those. I want to import all those instances so I can see the individual blocks and the values of those attributes. So it's going to import, I don't know, roughly about 150 or so blocks, and it's just reading that right out of DraftSight. So I have all that information, and it's going to dump it over into the block attributes tab. So here you see all the blocks. You'll see I actually put the internal handle, which is an identifier in there, which allows me then to quickly zoom to block. I think this was like 3 lines of code to do that. So I can, again, have Excel zoom right into the block if I need to. Find that block, no problem. Back over in Excel, I did some a little bit of magic in Excel where essentially, as I expand these columns out, you'll see when I edit these cells, I'm going to have the Excel background change colors for me. And I do this if I'm doing kind of a save function to it, so I can see what's going to be saved. So we're changing the room name, and we're adding a comment to this one block that we zoomed in on. And we're going to go ahead and push these back into DraftSight by saving those attribute changes. It went ahead and saved it, and there you go. That's a great example of how Excel is talking dynamically to DraftSight and changing. And imagine if you have mass changes or mass updates, that's an invaluable tool. Here's the Visual Basic code behind the scenes. Again, I just want to show you this. If you've never done coding, it can be a little bit scary, but again, it's not, as far as programming goes, we're not really talking about complex code to do this. You're just attaching to DraftSight and then using some DraftSight calls to do different things. So I like to show this as an example because this is literally the code behind the scenes to make all that work. So very cool indeed. The next example comes from a customer. What they ended up doing is that they set up and they use constraints. If you never use constraints, it's where you can take lines, arcs, circles, and give intelligence. So you can make it horizontal, make it perpendicular to this, or you can throw a dimension that will control the distance of it. So he's got a whole bunch of constraints already set up into this profile for this part. And then he's got some tribal knowledge set up in Excel. And this is so that he has formulas, he can do some lookup lists. Yeah, he can control kind of, if you think about it, the cells parameters inside of Excel. So when I look up at the parameters inside of DraftSight, you can see all the internal ones that were added, and then he's created user-defined ones. And then he's linked with a little bit of Visual Basic, the user-defined cells back into Excel. So that, again, a user can go through and modify those and update and change those. So we're going to kind of jump back over to Excel here. And we've got a couple of values that we're going to kind of walk through and modify for the OD and kind of height and adjust that whole. So let's zoom in a little bit. Here's the values that we're going to change. Again, the actual values don't matter, but it's just an Excel format. And then we're going to hit refresh, which pushes that information back into DraftSight. And as you can see, it's went ahead and updated that information using the constraints that are already in there. So very quick turnaround to create a myriad variations of these cells documents. Vince?
Very cool. The next example, we got some requests for bringing in, we've had some challenges with bringing in PDF files, and this is not just a DraftSight thing. This happens often where if I bring in a PDF into a different platform, you'll notice that oftentimes the text doesn't come in correctly. Well, it looks correct, it may not be actually brought in as text that we can modify. Do you want to switch over? So in this example, I'm going to just bring in a PDF into the drawing. I'm just going to bring it in at 00. And you'll notice that when I look at the text that comes in, first of all, the whole thing is a block. So if we want to modify it or make changes, we have to explode that. So I'll just type explode, select on the PDF import, and you'll notice then it's now objects that I can edit. Now, in some cases, we see text that comes in, instead of being a sentence, it comes in as individual words. So the function I created is something called merge text. I can simply select my text, pick my window where my M text is going to go, and now you'll notice it's a single text. I'll do that one more time. I'll select these bottom sentences. I'll merge them together, picking 2 points, then pick my window, drop it in, and you'll notice that it's now a single M text object, so I can make changes dynamically to it. So this was a request we got for folks that are looking to modify or bring in their PDFs and be able to manipulate that text after it came in. So again, here's an example of that being done in Lisp. It's about 50 lines of code, maybe a little less, but basically the command will allow you to grab the text objects, gets the layer where those things are, grabs the information for the style, the font, and all that, and then basically re-imports all that text, but puts it all together so it's a nice editable M text object. So very cool to be able to manipulate these things just with a small Lisp routine to be able to help, especially if you have tons and tons of documentation that you've got to go through and modify in a method that's requires you to go through and update all these drawings. So it's just another example. We can use Lisp to do some quick editing on M text. Thanks, Raymond.
Awesome, thanks. So our last example that we're going to cover is Visual Basic with SOLIDWORKS. And to kind of set this up, essentially we have customers that use both. They have 3D design, but then they also have to kind of toe the 2D world and do layouts. And so they want to be able to kind of communicate between those two groups or those two files. And so what you see here is, again, a little bit of setup. You have SOLIDWORKS on the left-hand side, and I went ahead and just copied over the column diagrams and kind of the grid layouts so that we can kind of see that in 3D. And then in the top right, we have DraftSight, and we have a couple blocks inserted. In the bottom right, we have Excel, and this is a simple Excel Visual Basic. There's not a lot that goes into it. Like most everything we're showing, we're trying to keep it pretty simple, but give you kind of the concept of how advanced and how powerful it can be. So how this works is you're going to take blocks, and blocks have an X, Y, Z value, basically, and a rotation. And then I'm going to take and tie that to SOLIDWORKS subassemblies, and a SOLIDWORKS subassembly has something called a transform. So it's kind of the three-dimensional rotation and location information on it. And I'm going to connect those two together. So if I move one, then I can move the other, or vice versa. So it's a simple kind of a little bit of math behind it, but you're just connecting those two objects. And in this particular example, I'm just doing it by name. So these blocks have attributes in them, so I know which subassemblies that I'm pulling from. So let's go ahead and do a quick example. So what we're going to do is first, obviously, we don't have the 3D parts inside of SOLIDWORKS just yet. I've just got the blocks inside of DraftSight. So the first thing is we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and push that information into SOLIDWORKS and drop that over. And then you're going to see it's going to fill out some of the Excel stuff at the bottom. That's just giving me kind of the XY locations, and it's just kind of more of a heads up, if you will. Let's go ahead and sync that. And it's going to go ahead and create and insert those subassemblies over inside SOLIDWORKS, so you can kind of see where they're located. They're located kind of in the middle of that column set, exactly how we have it shown in DraftSight. So no problem there. Now, let's go ahead and make some changes. So the first thing is we want to kind of move everything over and slide it closer to that column line. The next thing is let's go ahead and add a T-junction in here. And we're going to take and throw in another straight piece off of it and kind of rotate that around so we can actually have a T. And then we're going to also do a quarter round. And what you see on these blocks, you'll see those two yellow points. Those are actual points that are inserted in the block because there's multiple insertion points. And that makes it really easy to kind of do multi-snaps, if you will. And then we're going to take the other blocks that we had and kind of just move them down. So we've made some significant changes, obviously, in the 2D design. So we might have to propagate that back into 3D because they're going to be worried about the interfaces of the components, etc. So when I go sync, you can see it moved the elements that were already in the assembly, but it added the new elements that we generated. So again, a kind of a cool example showing how you can link, kind of that 2D and 3D worlds together and still have a very collaborative platform, even though they're two separate applications. All right, how to get started. Again, this is, we've all been there. We all had to start somewhere. So I get a lot of questions from prospective customers about where is the SDK? I can't find the SDK. SDK stands for Software Development Kit. And that's because a lot of applications out there, you either have to buy the API separate or you have to go download a separate install. That doesn't come with the application. Well, DraftSight, everything gets installed, right? So there's no worry. It's installed. You can start using it. In fact, if you use DraftSight, you can go up to the help menu. And if you pull that arrow down, you can see the API and Lisp help, which has a ton of great examples, lots of documentation, a lot of places to kind of get started, whether it's basic C or even Lisp. Another great location is your sample projects that get installed. So if you check your install directory, you will have an API directory with samples, and you can kind of see by that image, there's a couple subfolders, and the VB.NET has two examples, a quick example of editing blocks, and then how to create kind of your own DLL that can have its own drop-down menu. So you basically can create an add-in right inside of DraftSight. Macro recording is a great one. So if you turn on your macro toolbar inside of DraftSight and hit record and just do something, draw a line, draw a rectangle, add a piece of text, and then when you hit stop, you'll get an option on how you want to save it out. The most basic example is the VBA, that SWB file, and then what I would do is just open up Excel, and then you can load that right into an Excel Visual Basic for applications window, and you can start seeing the code and walking through it right from there. If you do want to start on the Visual Basic route and you've never done that, this is how I learned. I knew Lisp. I taught myself Lisp in high school and then in college. And basically, to switch over to Visual Basic, all I did is start hitting record, do something, and go and try to manipulate that and do something else with it. And when I got stuck, I was, I didn't have a lot of Google back then, so I had to call phone a friend, but there's a ton of resources out there on the web right now to really kind of, get some answers quickly. And then for Lisp, I kind of want to throw this out. I was hoping to have a date when this goes live, but one of the things Vince has done for us is he's created a 7-module training series on start to finish how to learn Lisp and do a lot of really great things and cool things with it. I'm super excited to see that be posted, and that will be available for customers here very, very soon. So again, some great how to get started pieces. Vince, did you want to add anything that before we jump into the polls?
No, I was just going to say it's really cool that you have so many different options. If you have done Visual Basic before, or if you're used to some of the other programming languages, you can use those in DraftSight. There's no one way to do it. So also, if you're just learning, Lisp might be an option, but also if you're coming from another CAD product, oftentimes companies have some Lisp routines, and so getting those to work in DraftSight, sometimes it takes a little bit of looking those things over, but for the most part, everything that I've tried from Lisp coming from other systems works very well, and so it's really cool just to have a lot of options, I think.
Most definitely, most definitely. All right, so we're gonna do a couple quick polls. This allows us to get to know you better, allows us to plan accordingly and create content that is useful for our customers. So the first one is a pretty simple one, just kind of what industry do you work in? We'll just, we're not gonna spend a lot of time on these polls, so jump in, throw in an answer, and we'll end up closing it out here in about 10 seconds or so. Just a few more seconds. Awesome, thanks for everybody that's voted. Let me go ahead and share that so you can kind of see. As you can see, the majority of the people joining us today are from the manufacturing sector, and then kind of the general catch-all other category. So let's go ahead and do one more poll. For some of the last one, we're only going to keep it open for a little bit. Definitely appreciate you, kind of responding for us. All right, perfect. We're going to go ahead and close that up, and I'll go ahead and share the results so you can kind of see that as well. So you can kind of see that it's a pretty good mix actually between new product design, building designs, and machining. Pretty even on that. So this now we're going to jump over into the Q&A section. And for the Q&A section, just go ahead and add questions. Like I said, I will personally be getting back with anybody that has it. Bhavik, I see your comment, and absolutely I will make sure that you get what you need. I'll probably reach out directly to you here in the next day or so and kind of get you all the links for the last few webinars that you can have at your fingertips. So no worries, I'll get that done for you. Again, open up for questions. Looks like we have a question here on, does it matter what version of Excel? And the answer is no. Excel has, VBA inside of it, so whether you're using the latest version or 4 or 5 years, you should still be able to work with it. When it connects to DraftSight, it uses the DraftSight API, so whatever version of DraftSight is installed, it will use that. One of the cool things about versioning, just to touch base on it, is if there is a change in command, instead of changing, let's say, I'll just do it as an example, like the open command. Let's say I use the open command, and then next year something changes, and we add some cool capability to open inside of DraftSight, and there's a new API call for that. Well, instead of changing what I need to do so it breaks the old, kind of programming, what will happen is that new command will be called open2. So if I want to take advantage of that new feature, I can rewrite open2, but that means it doesn't break anything going backwards. And so it's a really cool system that we see. So Bhavik, I will also take your second question kind of offline on, how to do 3D house design. I will probably kind of reach out and maybe you and I can spend 15 or 30 minutes together on a kind of a direct call on that. Any other questions? Well, if you think about it later, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help. And I definitely enjoy doing these types of presentations and one of my favorite topics. And again, let me thank you one more time for taking time out of your busy schedule and day to join us on this. And I hope you got something out of it. You should be receiving an email from us within a couple business days that has a link to this recording. Again, if you don't get it or if you need something else, don't hesitate to reach out. And this will now conclude the webinar. Thanks.